So we're gonna do some Q&A. I'm gonna start it off though with just one leading question. So one of the things I think that's most important about augmented reality is this topic that Bruce brings up of experience design. And we're kind of in terra incognita here in terms of what does it mean to create experiences with digital media in the physical world like this. Rob, I just love the idea of smart-ass plaques and 1812 reenactors running around in the physical world playing ARGs. So let's try and tease out a little something about experience design and what are maybe some of the things that kind of lead us toward design principles for AR in the physical world. Let me start with you, Ken, because you guys did dinosaurs, man. There's nothing cooler than dinosaurs, right? Are those mics on?
Click on.
Is that working? No. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I think that's kind of maybe the kind of holy grail of AR, trying to sort of bring, you know, these rich experiences into what we're experiencing in terms of whether it's entertainment or whether it's educational or you know, I'd love to be able to see I guess, you know, the possibility of a greater level of interaction with those augmented spaces in terms of museum spaces and how the dinosaurs essentially had to tie everything to, you know, a stand in order to be able to deliver that rich interactive experience. But I think it would be interesting to see how we can get to a point where just moving through a space can interact, can create experiences.
Rob, what makes people's eyes light up in your experiences? What's the secret sauce?
Well, that's a good question. Before the panel, Gene was saying, you know, what's the not just to me, but to all of us, you know, what's the ROI, what's the return on investment? And I know I went through the slides quickly, but what I said was, I get paid the same if the students are bored or excited. But my return on investment, you saw one slide with one of our students, Adriana, in the library, and that wasn't forced or faked. You know, that's what they all look like while they're playing the game. So that's my return on investment when we get those moments. And I guess, I mean, you know, I don't know if I have a solution except to say that experience design, that's a great phrase, but it might lure us into thinking we can, you know, it's sort of a total phrase, we can control the experience. We can design every aspect of the experience, and you know, much more we were successful with experience facilitating and making, you know, putting a bunch of toys in the room and then letting the people play with the toys and create their own experiences. So I think, you know, you have to go halfway. You give them things that have affordances, that are delightful, that are surprising, that interconnect in fun and interesting and hopefully revelatory ways, and then you stop, and then you let them come to you and fiddle around.
David, what do you think about that? Experience design or experience facilitation?
I agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we've found over many years in the lab is that one of the most powerful, especially early on where a lot of the experiences, the technology wasn't that great, the tracking wasn't that great, things were cumbersome, but what was always a hit was people in the moment of making were actually learning and discovering so much. As an expressive tool, it's actually quite powerful, even when it isn't a technological wow. And once we found that out, I think that's one of the, so I think you're right. I mean, I know you're not talking about people actually making the AR, but I think the kind of engagement that comes from people being creatively involved, and AR has been one of those technologies. It's not like video where now everybody's a YouTube producer, it's late coming, but this will be taken up. At least that's one route I see. And that people being involved in these experiences is one answer to the why augment, absolutely. And I don't think that's the only way to go. I think there could be very contemplative pieces. You know, I myself, I've made a couple of pieces that I actually successful but are not very interactive. They're much more linear. Like people are actually, contemplating these, small augmented reality poems. I think there's a space for that, but I do think that kind of active engagement is one of the powerful things that we can use.
So Jim, you've done a lot of work with Metaio, and Metaio is actually a company that has some of the best tracking technology out there, registration technology and all that. How important is that to making really cool experiences that turn people on?
Well, I think what they're learning very quickly over the 10 years that they've been doing this is that there's room for improvement, and they're making great strides in that correct direction. They just had their annual conference earlier this week in Munich, and one of the things that they were showcasing was obviously some of those developments in that tracking capability. So instead of the floating, dancing, poorly registering POI anchor that hangs over the doorway that says exit, versus snapping that directional content directly to the face and locking it in place. So no matter how much you're walking, looking through that device, it's static and it's locked in. So it's getting much better, and I think they realize that to get away from the notion of AR being a novelty, it needs to be, because there's a great practicality to it if used in the right in the right application, and I think that application is providing a solution to a problem or providing an answer to a question. Because if it's just there, like much of the marketing materials we've seen in practice, it is just a novelty, and it's kind of the reintroduction of a product when it's already reached a maturation part of the cycle. Oh God, what do we do with Coke? Now everybody knows Coke, so let's do Coke New, or Coke Zero. So why do we want to do something to address that? And I think if we want to get away from the novelty of, oh, it's the same Coke it's always been, how can we use that to fight evils and help us solve problems? And I think it's the application of that, which is, how does it help me answer a question?
To fight evil, you need to wear a cape, I think.
We can make that happen.
We have
As long as it's tightly registered to your neck. Okay, so who's got a question in the room here? Dr. Sterling.
If somebody doubled your budget, you got twice as much money as you have today, where would you put your creative energies? What would you do that you're not doing right now, or more of?
Everybody hear that?
I'd go out for lunch, I think.
Gene,
Bruce asked if you could double your budget, where would you put your creative energies?
Well, I could answer. I'm sure as soon as I answer this, I'll think of a much better answer later. But one of the things that I would do is immediately get more students involved in the lab. We do have great facilities. We still haven't pushed quite against the edge of them. We have tracking within a centimeter. It's funny, when we first got our tracking system up, we didn't find that it tracked very well, and we realized that we put the really expensive, like $10,000 sensor, like the wrong place on the $45,000 headset. So we were like all reaching out, but for us it was fine. We had so much to learn, it didn't even bother us. Like we were like, wow, the tracking's really bad, and it took us almost a year to realize the error. But that said, I think equipment is only so much. I wouldn't invest in equipment. I would actually bring different people into the lab. I think one of the things I would do is I need better sound people. I need someone with a background in circus. I need, we already have historians. I think more people with different skills coming in, having access to basic training and the tools, and then seeing where that could take the lab, that's where I would invest.
I think in terms of budgets, it's coming through the advertising and marketing perspective. There's always, great expectation and never budget. So I think, if I was to have doubled the budget, I probably would put a lot more into how can I make more of a story, or how can I make more interactive? Because at the end of the day, like when we're building, what we did for the ROM, with using String and Unity on the iOS platform, tracking was really great. That was one reason we went with String, and the Unity as a really great
Absolutely. I'll take it to start. I'm sure other people have, but it's really interesting. One of the things that I've noticed, especially going to a lot of tech conferences, is typically gender imbalance in terms of it's almost like the tech heavier the conference, the fewer women that you see at the table. It's been really interesting in our lab because we've always basically had a gender balance, and I think it's made a big difference in terms of the kinds of things we wanted to make. There are fewer, as soon as we got Unity, it wasn't like, let's make an AR first-person shooter. Sure, we had a saber, we've got some dragons, we've got some, they're sort of, but, we all, on a very basic surface level, I think we've got different, cultural references. I think, in terms of our lab, we've got a lot of focus on narrative and story and spatial storytelling and personal experiences and the idea of haunted objects and, and a variety of things that are, a lot of works that take place in domestic spaces, sort of that traditional purview. I think one of Helen's first amazing pieces was, this beautiful little house. In my experience, the men in the lab weren't that interested in making those. It's kind of like killer app right away. And I think, so this isn't sort of an inherent gender difference at all, but I think it's very interesting what attracts men and women to the technology and also the confidence they bring about what they have. And I try very hard to really encourage women students to come to the lab, to stay in the lab, because I think it's incredibly important to have different perspectives going forward.
I just say, I want to be careful in the sort of thing I say here because it implies sort of making all sorts of essentializing stereotypes. But yeah, I think that, Bruce today, this morning, talked about he had this list of what people were doing with their phones, and AR was way down here, and SMS was way up here, and it's not just women sending messages. I understand that, but I think that another thing about a lot of our exciting experiences were in this borderline between what we're calling AR today and social media, communication, interaction, that sort of thing. If that's what everybody wants to do with their phones, then what does augmented reality bring to communication with one another, to interaction with one another? And doesn't have to be a woman to have that thought, but I think that maybe some of the women in our games and activities certainly grabbed onto that aspect of it.
Okay, now Kevin informs me that we are temporally registered with the end of the panel time slot, so join me in thanking the panelists here. This is great.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you to all of the panelists. We're going to take 2 minutes, and I'm going to have the panelists for the second panel come up. Jennifer Burkett, Irving Hope, Paul Travers, and Nathan Kroll. So don't go anywhere. This is not an official break time. Stay where you are. We're going to have the panelists come up